we're now on to the next panel. This panel last year went mental, and we've been delighted. Every year we've asked all the women's representation, would you like to come to Alloa Women's Festival? And they've ignored us. It's brilliant, so we don't need to worry about them. They didn't ignore us this year. So we're delighted to have some back that you'll know very well. They've been to Alloa before. We've got Johann Lamont, who came last year, seemed to like it, and has come back again. We have got the most awesome KC that we have in the entire country, Joanna Cherry, who has been here with us and supported us from the very start. It's women like her that make a difference to us all. We've also got Pam Gosal from the Conservatives has decided to turn up, and we are delighted. And it's not just Pam Gosal. She recently got her doctorate, so she's Dr. Pam Gosal. And I'm a wee bit cheeky sometimes, as those that know me, and when a brilliant MP resigned, I thought, would you like to come to Alloa? So I asked her, and she said yes. So we have Rosie Duffield. Oh, I'm over the moon. Thank you very much. So I'm going to pass on to the women of representation, and please fire your questions into Sligo. Remember, it's your questions that make this all work. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies. I just want to say that I am a woman. For those of you that don't know, but I'm sure we all know what a woman is, only if I could bring those MSPs out of that concrete building to see what the real world is and what women look like. I want to start by thanking everybody that's made today possible. This is my first visit, and I certainly know it's not going to be my last visit. For those of that you know me in Parliament as a member of the Scottish Parliament, and probably fighting for women and girls' rights and protecting their rights as well. But going back, you know, I was born in Glasgow to an Indian family. Growing up, I had every single barrier thrown at me. Not by my family, right? I'm very fortunate by the community. Pam, you're not allowed to do this. Pam, you have to get married at this age. Pam, this is what a good Indian girl does. Pam, you can't do that. So I was never allowed to think myself. Then suddenly in my teenage years, my father passed away, my big sister passed away. Yes, I was very sad, but then suddenly I had to become head of the household. So suddenly Pam had to become a man. I'm not quite sure if that's the right terminology, but basically start thinking, speaking, because the community didn't want somebody like me to run my father's businesses and to be head of the family. But I went against all odds, and I fought. And that's why I always say it's so important for us to have a voice. Me being from a minority background, I even had a voice then. Yes, it scared me, but I still spoke out, and I still went on to do the things I did. I left school with no qualifications, and just last week I was awarded my doctorate from also coming along a very, very big fight in the family with education and looking after the family and being that good Indian girl you have to be. So what I never thought, I'm going to be honest, is never in the month of Sundays that I would be going in to be a member of the Scottish Parliament to fight to say what a woman looks like and who a woman is. I actually never thought that. I thought, if I go in, I'm going to fight for women's rights. I'm going to do my work around domestic abuse because I've seen that around a lot of friends and families. But to stand up and fight for our sheer existence as a woman, to say that, I thought that was shocking. And most of you obviously know that they followed the Scottish Parliament and the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. I didn't come from a political background. I had no politicians in my family. It was scary. It was horrible. Every time I talk about it, my eyes start to wanting to water because I think it was horrible. It was nasty. And we had people in there that every day in that committee that treated us like this, right? We had to fight, right? Me and Rachel, right, every day in those closed doors, private sessions, we had to fight for what we wanted to say. We were cut short. We were told that basically our voices didn't matter. And I have to say, you know, this is called representation. This part is, if it wasn't for the women, and you ladies all know who you are, right, and those organisations, I would never have opened my mouth to basically actually voice out to say what I mean and speak up about women's single-sex spaces and services. You gave me the courage. That's why I spoke out. Otherwise, I would never have spoken out because I was so scared. And today, about representation, we may be all from different political parties, but oh my God, when we come together, our voice is much stronger out there because they know that we are fighting for something that we all have a common cause in. And these ladies have probably seen it all in politics more than I have. I have to say that I think it's shocking what's happening in Parliament right now. Most of you seen last week, you know, we've got debate after debate that's not been brought forward by the Scottish Government. It's been brought forward by whether it's Conservatives or other people bringing it forward. But I think that something that's so much out there, we've got over 50% of voters are out there are women, and they don't think we exist. They don't think we matter. So our voices are very important, whether it's meetings like this, forums, festivals. The more we say is less. And please, I would say, don't be frightened. I say this to a lot of people. I've been doing a lot of International Women's Day talks to a lot of people from different backgrounds. And I said, do you know when your rights are taken away from you? That's when you're going to wake up. It took us that long to have that right to vote. And now I think we're going backwards in time. Look what's happening in Iran. Look what's happening in Iraq. Look what's happening in Afghanistan. Look round the world. But then also look what's happening at home. NHS, Sandy Peggy's case. Look what's happening in our schools, the single-sex toilets, what's happening there. Look at what's happening basically in our justice system as well. It's basically spread everywhere. And if we don't continue to have these voices and we don't speak out, then to be honest, I think that women, we're going to end up going backwards and our rights are being diluted every single day. So my one ask is, as a politician, I will always voice, but as Pam, just Pam, I will always stand up for women and girls. I've got a domestic abuse bill going through, which in the next 2 months is going to be out there in public. It's drafted. And I've had some amazing support from women and survivors, victims, and spoke to them, and lots of organisations. I will continue to keep the fight going in the Scottish Parliament for all women that don't have a seat at that table. But what we do need is from all you ladies, and please go home, talk to your daughters, sisters, friends. We need you behind us, or if not in front of us, to be honest, because we're nothing in politics if we don't have women standing by us, and we need full representation as well from all parties, which is very important. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to follow Pam, and I think it's really important that our movement is a cross-party movement, and I would have significant differences, and I'm sure Pam would have significant differences with me on lots of aspects of socio-economic policy, but I think it's really great to have one of our Tory sisters here. And yeah, and I'm very, yeah. So basically, I was billed as a recovering politician, and that's what I've got on my Twitter feed. And I have to say, no disrespect to the people who campaigned for me last year, losing my seat last year was one of the best things that's ever happened to me. But having said that, winning my seat in 2015 was one of the best things that ever happened to me. But when I got elected in 2015, I had no idea of what was coming down the track at me and so many other women in politics, like the women sitting at this table and the women sitting in this room. And you know, I got involved in politics at a time which, at least in my experience, was a very positive time in Scotland. Now, I know some of our sisters here today who were on the Better Together side of the referendum, independence referendum, wouldn't necessarily agree with that. But the reason I got involved was not really through party politics, but through grassroots politics, and through one of the grassroots groups that, if you can have such a thing as a lawyer's grassroots group, that's a bit questionable, but one of the grassroots groups that grew up during the referendum. And I think after the referendum, there was an incredible moment of opportunity for my former political party, which was absolutely squandered. And not only was it squandered from the point of view of those of us who would like to see an independent Scotland, it was also squandered in the sense that there perhaps was a moment when people could have been brought back together again after the referendum, and there could be a recognition of difference and a moving together forward, not necessarily agreeing with each other, but agreeing to disagree in a respectful fashion. And I know some people's experience of the referendum wasn't pleasant, and I had some unpleasant experiences on social media during the independence referendum, but it was like a vicarage tea party compared to what followed on the debate over self-identification in Scotland. And I think it's left our politics in a really, really bad way. And that's why I say I'm glad I lost my seats. I'm really enjoying being out of it. I'm enjoying being back in my legal career. But I want to find something positive to say today, because I don't regret having been a member of Parliament. It was a wonderful experience for me. And you know, I went into it thinking I was going to be part of the generation that would deliver independence for Scotland. That turned out not to be the case. And I've ended up being involved and putting most of my energies into our struggle. I wish we didn't have to do this struggle, but we do, and I'm very proud to be part of it, and I'm very proud to work with the women in this room and the women on this panel. And I suppose that's one positive thing that has come out of the division that's been caused in Scotland. And, you know, I think most of us in this room would agree that the person who led the country through those divisive years probably has the biggest responsibility for it, but it's not all her fault. Other political leaders have contributed to, most obviously, the Green Party, but I would also call out Alec Cole-Hamilton, and I would also call out Anas Sarwar, who I actually rather like, and I'm glad that he has had the courage to change his mind, but he could have made such a difference if he'd listened to people like Joanne at the time. And I think it's been a huge failure of our Parliament. And you know, when I was preparing this morning and thinking what I would say, I remembered, those of you who are Scots might remember that when Holyrood opened, the new building opened in 2004, Edwin Morgan, a Scottish poet, wrote a poem about the new building and what we wanted from our Parliament. And one of the lines in the poem is, "What do the people want of the place? They want it to be filled with thinking persons, as open and adventurous as its architecture. A nest of fearties is not what they want. A symposium of procrastinators is what they do not want. A phalanx of forelock tuggers is what they do not want. And perhaps above all, the droopy mantra of it wisny me is what they do not want." And I think that was right, but I'm afraid that's what we've ended up with. And I think all political parties bear a responsibility for that, although I suppose in fairness, Pam's party have actually the least responsibility for it, because I think they've probably behaved most sensibly in respect of the issue of self-identification. But it has poisoned our society, and there are some people hold the view that people ought to be able to self-ID, and I disagree with that very strongly, but I would never say they shouldn't be able to hold that view, and I wouldn't debate with them. But I think if you allow any issue to become as poisonous as this issue has become, the way in which this issue has been debated has become, then it poisons the whole of our political debate. And I think that's what has happened in Scotland and in the UK as a whole, except I do think that things are starting to change and we are starting to have more and more victories. I'm not complacent. There's still a lot of battles to be won. So I suppose what I want to say positively today, negatively, had I known what I was going to be facing when I stood for Parliament this time 10 years ago, I would never have stood. But I'm really glad I didn't know, because I don't regret standing. And the positive thought I want to leave you with is that we, as ordinary women from all walks of life, organising together across party lines, have achieved great change in Scotland and across the United Kingdom. And so it is an inspirational thought as to what women can do if they enter politics. You don't have to enter party politics. Personally, I love the idea of lots of independent women standing next year. And I would encourage people to think about doing that. And that's really what I want to say. Despite all my unpleasant experiences in politics, I'm totally proud that I had a political career, and I feel very privileged to have had it. And I would encourage everyone in this room to think about political activity, but remember, you doesn't necessarily have to be putting yourself in the firing line. Really important work can be done behind the scenes as well. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, how do I follow that? Thank you very much. I don't disagree with anything that either Pam or Joanna have said. First of all, the cross-party aspect of what we do as women, we're women first and we're party political second, and I realised that the minute I got to Parliament. Because if we don't look out for each other, we can be damn sure that most of the men that run most of the parties absolutely will not. So we have to do it. And everyone here has played a really vital role in how we have got through the last few years. Because when we have our lowest moments, and sometimes, you know, if Joanna and I didn't happen to see each other in Parliament that day, it would be harder. I would sort of see her across the chamber or behind the scenes when we voted, and it would genuinely keep me going. She's been my sister for the last 7 years in Parliament. And I miss her tremendously in that place because it hasn't got any easier. I'm afraid I'm trying to be upbeat, but never in a million years, just like the other two have said, did I think that I would get to Parliament in 2017 and have to spend my entire life proving to the Labour Party that, you know, despite all of the briefings by the guys behind the scenes, and it happens still. It happened about 10 days ago. There was a very silly story about me that actually didn't land, but they're still trying to brief against me because I am an awkward woman. I never thought that the party that's supposed to support women like me, who was a Unison member, a teaching assistant, a single mum on benefits, I never thought I'd be fighting barristers, you know, who run our party now. And I've been labelled as a reform right-wing woman. I would rather chew glass than join reform. You know, I'm a left-wing activist and always have been, but when that story is told about you by men, by TRA activists, it sticks. And so people believe that about my politics. There are some incredible left-wing women here, the Labour Women's Network, union officials. There's even, you know, Communist Party members upstairs, and the Morning Star has written so much in support of the women's movement, yet we're labelled right-wing. It's not a right-wing movement. I mean, I'm really grateful to the Conservative women who have supported us and helped us, but this is about women who are like Sandy Peggy. It's about working women who don't have the platform that we have. Therefore, it is our duty. It's the duty of everybody on the left to stand up for people like I was before I got to Parliament. And that's what staggers me. But, you know, sometimes you go home and you think, these are my values and my beliefs, and it is hurtful because your political party is kind of your family. Those are your values and things you've grown up to deeply believe. And when you're betrayed by that movement, when they ignore you, when they don't care whether you're there or not, it hurts. And life is not easy in Parliament at the moment, but I'm afraid I've got to say it is so much easier to be independent. I can say and do what I want now. And I'm just finding my feet and sort of finding my platform, and I can have debates that I know I would never have been allowed to have when I was part of the Labour movement, because I knew whenever I spoke up, there'd be a whole load of other briefings against me. And now they're not really that bothered. I think they think I'm just a little voice who'll go away again next time and I'm not their problem anymore, which is fine. So I held a debate the other day on, on women's rights, gender critical beliefs and the Equality Act. And slowly and surely the TRAs are emailing in and saying, how dare you, and all that sort of stuff. But I now don't care because they're not from the Labour Party. And if they are, who cares? So thank you very much for inviting me today.
Thank you very much. I will be brief because we've had some fabulous speeches already, and I can't add much as someone who basically spends my life now shouting at the television. Who knew that that was a political contribution? I don't think Keir Hardie ever thought this was a way in which you could defend the class, but that is basically what I am reduced to now. I was thinking before I came, I didn't actually know we were supposed to be speaking, so forgive me if this is a bit incoherent. How did I feel now about where we were? And I go between being absolutely raging, furious, to reflecting on the fact that the women in this room and the women across the country and women beyond have started organising again. And we are, I remember that, when we were dealing with some of the stuff in the Parliament, the solidarity and sisterhood that women showed me individually, I will never forget. And it gave me strength and courage. So every time anybody sends a tweet or an email or just simply is kind, remember that that is supporting those who are still on the front line. And that should inspire us when we're facing these terrible times. I'm raging for a number of reasons. One of them is, as we reflected this morning, the things facing women in their lives, in their work, the pressure they're under. I fear for our young women. We had an event in the Scottish Parliament around non-fatal strangulation, and I thought that I had heard everything. And I am still getting over what I heard at that event about what young women are expected to accept in their personal lives. So I fear for our young women. We heard this morning about women in prostitution. We know the fear of violence remains. We know the scourge of child sexual abuse and sexual exploitation exists. And we don't have the time, or we're not permitted the time, to debate these issues and put pressure on the political process because they're too busy redefining away what a woman even is, rather than talk about how that is expressed in women's lives. And I can't forgive the zealots, but at least they believe it. The ones who cannot be forgiven are those men and women in the Scottish Parliament and elsewhere who don't believe in self-ID, don't believe that men can become women, but it doesn't matter enough to them to change their minds or create a political problem. I've a lot of time for John Swinney as an individual. He was always very personal to me. I could not believe that he missed the opportunity to change the discussion in the Scottish Parliament when he said, I have to respect that position, which is that men can become women. And I can only conclude that he has made a political calculation, that it doesn't matter enough. I can tell you the movement, I think, in other political parties, including my own, is because they understand precisely that it does matter to ordinary people. I never thought that I would have to explain to anybody it was a bad idea to put a rapist in a women's jail. We have to get a reality check about what we're expected to tolerate. But people maybe said, well, that's not really my issue. And why we should salute Sandy Peggy and other women like her is because they're talking about a reality that almost everybody understands. Everybody is a daughter, a sister, a mother, a friend who might want the privacy of a changing room at their working place, and they can't understand how this can possibly be the case. So I as I said, I spend a lot of time raging. I have some time when I'm optimistic because women have come together. I think the thing that we really need to grapple with is how unforgivable it is that we are politically represented by people who will shrug their shoulders at policies which will exacerbate the abuse and exploitation of young children, of women at the hands of predatory men. This is not a game. And when people say, well, you need to be kind, the thing I've learned in my lifetime that's been exposed, and we heard about it this morning, it's been exposed to public attention, is the reality of what happened to children and young girls and women who went into care, who were in their own homes, they weren't safe in a sports club and they weren't safe in church. We have a national inquiry exposing what male predatory behaviour looks like at the very same time as people are holding on to a policy which exacerbates and provides loopholes for that male predatory behaviour to continue. That's why I care about it so much, and I think it is unforgivable. I think we should be angry because the price of not getting this right is visited on those who do not have the capacity, who have not got the capacity to speak up for themselves. It's why I, as an old woman, no longer in politics, do speak up, because I know that young women are silenced. And Rosie talks about her experience, but we know probably in every part of people's working lives, they're being silenced. And one last point I want to make. I never thought, when I was taking on the old sexist men in the Labour movement, that as an older woman myself, I would be confronted with young, emboldened men who've been given permission by their progressiveness to talk down and shout down women. We have to continue to be angry about that, because we have got allies, men who did learn, who did change, and they are now looking to a younger generation who somehow think it's the radical thing to do, to shout down women who want to come together and speak about their experiences, and we need to expose that. And I just want one last thing I want to say. I want to thank every woman who's responsible in organising this event, because it's not just the event. It is the fact that women are finding their voice in all the ways. It's unforgivable that all has to be done by voluntary endeavour. Somebody said that For Women Scotland and other groups are like an MBM, are like a revising chamber, because the people are paid to do it aren't doing their job. We have to continue because the price is too high if we don't. Thank you.
Thank you, women. Brilliant speeches. Now we go to the questions. This is close to my heart, but we have the one which says, what can we do to get Scottish professional feminist and human rights class, such as in gender, to open and justify and why they won't support women?
I would just want to make one point about state-supported women's activism. That actually back in the day, the short period of time when I was a government minister, we funded women's organisations to challenge government, to challenge it, to say, we're not sure if you're doing that right. We have an expertise. We know how women's lives are being led. We know what we need to do around domestic abuse. We know what we need to do around sexual assaults. They weren't there to reinforce what the Scottish Government was doing. And the Scottish Government wasn't there simply to do what lobbyists wanted them to do. It was supposed to be a dynamic exercise in getting it right for women, and we need to get back to that. I personally, if I were in a position of any authority, would be having an immediate review of what we're funding and what they're doing with the funding. Yeah. It cannot be right that we're funding services to support women who have suffered sexual assault, and women are excluding themselves, or they're waiting on a list for 2 years to be supported, or that when the big cases come up, when the Sandy Peggy case comes up, when the double rapist gets put in the women's jail, the one group of women you can be guaranteed won't say anything are those who will be funded to speak up for women. That's unforgivable.
Okay, I haven't really spoken about this much publicly, but I'm on the Women in Equality Select Committee again. I was on it in 2017. I've done other committees, and I've been put back on the committee despite the fact that Labour will have blocked me joining any committee. The Tories nominated me instead of giving a Tory a place, so I got back on the Women in Equality Select Committee. And my experience is exactly the same as Pam's, so I'm worried about putting this on record, but the chair, Sarah Owen, who's Labour MP, is the exact opposite of all of our views on sex and gender, and she will choose the witnesses that we have. And we did a puberty blockers inquiry, and in the audience I had Hannah Barnes, the journalist, who then wrote a piece about it, and I had LGB Alliance, and I had various friends, because the bit that you don't see, the bit before broadcast, the 20 minutes before, is like being in a room like this full of TRAs for me. It's not lovely. I'm quite tough, but the things I hear that I can't report, the things that are passively, aggressively said to and about me, the fact that I'm the only one whose questions are shut down or shortened every single week, it's really quite difficult to be there, but I'm going to not leave, I'm not going anywhere. And we had... We had an inquiry recently where LGB Alliance, do you guys know LGB Alliance? They submitted some evidence for one of our panels, and their letter that they submitted was deemed to be, I think, defamatory, because in it they referred to John Nicholson and a few others who had actually defamed them. So Sarah Owen and the clerks decided that that letter was not allowed to be seen by panel members. So it looks on the surface as though, oh, wow, Rosie's got a place in that committee. You know, how great. She's being allowed to question the government and things. But it's not really still. There's not, you know, under the surface, all of this stuff still happens. So LGB Alliance were invited to alter their letter and to take out the bits that they found offensive. That doesn't happen to any other organisation. Only the feminist organisations, only the ones on our side. They'll choose which witnesses to ask. None of them are on our side. The people that were giving evidence on the puberty blockers trial, none of them were on our side. They were all people who've been previously investigated by journalists for being TRAs. It happens all the time on every level, so we have to be vigilant about that stuff, because while it looks like things are moving forward, they're not necessarily. So we have to still be vigilant about these things. And people like Amnesty International, they're still digging down. So we just have to keep being vigilant. That's the only answer I've got.
Just a brief word on the parliamentary committees, and then I want to go back to focus on the specific question. But yeah, I mean, I've watched what's happened on Pam's committee, and I've watched what's happened in your committee, and I think it's absolutely disgraceful. And I don't think the chair of either committee, neither Karen Adam nor Sarah Owen, are performing the role of chair in an appropriate fashion. And I can say that because I was a chair of a committee at Westminster, and it was a very divided committee, because, no offence, but we had quite a lot of human rights skeptics on my committee from the right towards the end of the last Parliament. But I bent over backwards to try and accommodate them, because they had as much right to be there as me, because they had been democratically elected. And so I think the way that these committees are conducting themselves is a disgrace. But I think there's a wider problem than this, just the chair. A lot of the staff are captured in Westminster and also at Holyrood, and you know, they will have influence on choices about witnesses and choices about who gets to ask questions. But just to get back to the specific question about how we tackle this issue, I want to look at the position of the Scottish Human Rights Commission. So some of you may have read Dr. Claire Methven O'Brien, who is a Scottish Human Rights Commissioner, has been writing openly over the last couple of weeks about her concerns about the way in which the Scottish Human Rights Commission, when it's been asked to comment on legislation like the self-ID legislation, hasn't been fulfilling its mandate properly, because it's been looking at things simply through the lens of what they call trans rights, as opposed to looking properly at the implications of such legislation on other groups' rights, such as women's rights and the rights of LGBT people, and failing to look at all the international instruments, failing to put enough weight on CEDAW, etc. Now, this is really important because the National Human Rights Commission is a term of art. The United Nations expects countries to have human rights commissions that are independent of their government. Now, I'm one of the few people that the British government managed to successfully send to Rwanda. And I went to Rwanda. I managed to come back. But a reason I mention that is I went to Rwanda this time last year as chair of the Westminster Parliament's Joint Committee on Human Rights to look at the position of human rights in Rwanda because of the Tory scheme. And those who are critical of human rights protections in Rwanda are very critical of the Rwandan National Human Rights Commission because it never criticizes the government, and it always takes the government's side. And this is a shocking thing, and everybody on the left was really shocked by this, and it is shocking. But I thought, actually, if you applied the same standards to the Scottish Human Rights Commission, it would be found pretty lacking as well, because it hasn't scrutinised government legislation properly, and so many of the people who work there, commissioners past and present, chairs past and present, have been utterly captured and are failing in their remit. And so I think Joanne's right. I hope the next government, and I'm actually hoping the next Scottish government might be some sort of rainbow coalition, and we might have a more rainbow parliament, not in that sense, but back in 2003, well, I was quite fond of the rainbow, but let's face it, it's been stolen from us, but that we might have a more varied government from different parties who might be prepared to review issues like, how is our Human Rights Commission operating? How is it that government bodies bodies that are supposed to be at arm's length from the government but are mainly dependent on government funding are basically in this symbiotic relationship with the government where they both just kiss each other's ass the whole time? We need an inquiry into that. And Rosie's saying it's the same in Westminster. I've always thought it was worse in Scotland, but there's definitely an element of it at Westminster as well. Thanks.
Next question up, we'll have, where did it go? Scottish politics is a bin fire following many women walking away. How do we encourage independent thinking women to get involved when we are treated so poorly? And this will probably go back to what Joanna saying, that we should have the whole place should be full of independent women at Holyrood. That make a big difference. Anyway, how do you get us involved?
So I'm going to say something maybe unpopular. I do think we should, as many women who are interested, should be standing. It should be, although it's not, politics is not just about standing. It's about all the other things that people do. But it is to also understand inside political parties. You can have the capacity to organise. I look back and I think as a younger woman, we were always the stone in the shoe. We were always the women that were annoying. What surprised me, I guess, was the extent to which what we thought were guaranteed rights became vulnerable. I made the comment earlier about sending a male rapist to women's jail. I had a great imagination as a young person. It never in a million years ever occurred to me that I would have to even remotely go there and explain why that's not a good idea, or why girls in schools shouldn't have separate facilities for the toilet, or indeed, as the Victorians recognised, that women needed separate toilet facilities in order to function in society. I didn't think that these things would have to be revisited, so we have to be alert to that. But I do think to understand that both inside political parties and outside, people can build alliances internally, and that's our experience inside the Labour Party. You can build them externally, and I guess, Joanne talked earlier about the referendum, which divided the world in a way that I didn't want it to be divided, and I accept that. But I do think what has given me heart in the last part of my political time in the Parliament and now is actually it is possible to work together where you agree and where you don't, to disagree respectfully, because we spent a lot of this has emerged out of a culture of politics which justifies that if one person thinks that on A, they should be just destroyed and, you know, put to one side on every single issue. That is, if you believe in A, you have to also believe in, you have to sign up for all the other things. That bundling, as somebody described it, of ideas, that you have to buy the whole package or you can't, you know, you shouldn't be functioning politically, I think we should disregard. So I hope that there will be a diversity of women coming forward, and that it is like in every part of my experience has been that women will find each other and will work together, and the more solidarity, more sisterhood that can create an environment where women will do that, I think will mean that women will come forward in whatever way that they want to do. It can, as we've heard already, can be unbelievably tough, but it also can be, as I have all of my life, not really just when I was in Parliament, but all of my politics has been strengthened by sisterhood and women coming together, both within my own party and externally, and I think that can be a message of optimism. And when we hear things like the description of women's lives this morning, that's a call to action, even when it is tough.
Well, I would definitely say, ladies, stand, because see, if you don't have a seat at that table, there'll be decisions made even worse than what they're getting made. We might be only me and Tess on that Equalities Committee. We might be 2 people, a minority come to numbers, but every time there's a decision to be made, we may not win that vote, but I tell them, can you record? Not just 2 people, by the way, that didn't, the majority, so the recording is the majority voted. No, I want you to put the minority in, and I want you to say why, basically, we didn't vote. So if I was to speak to the Pam that came into politics and took in 2019 and was elected in 2021, would I have stood, right, what I know today? I get death threats. By the way, I'm meant to be sent to Kuwait, Pakistan, these countries, right, because my thinking is backward. That's what it is, because I want to stand up for women and girls, and that's backward thinking. Would I stand? Absolutely, 100%. I've got more fire in my belly today, right? Scotland isn't diverse, by the way. They talk a good game. It's a good tick in the box. Everybody wants to put, oh, how many people of colour do you have? How many lesbians do you have? How many gays do you have? How many black people do you have? Oh, so hold on. How many women do you have? And even that's now diluted in our boardrooms, because guess what? Biological males can say that they're trans women and they can have a seat at the table. So please, please, ladies, I don't care what party you support, but if you want to come and support, stand for us, it's fine. Right, okay. Here we go, steady on, do you hear her? She's my pal now. right. But honestly, every single party go and infect them, pollute them, and tell them what women are about. Go and stand.
I mean, obviously, I agree with what's been said about how, not about joining the Tories, but about how everyone should organise within their own party. But I have to add a rider to that, and that is I could be accused of being a hypocrite because I've stopped organising within my own party. And there's a real problem in the SNP at the moment, because in addition to the fact the party has lost so many members over the last few years, it also has had its internal democracy hollowed out. Now, I look around this room and I can see several women who I organised with in the SNP a few years ago, and many of us got elected to the SNP's National Executive Committee, and we were mandated by the party members who elected us to stand up for internal party democracy and also to stand up for women's rights. But we were thwarted in our attempts to do so by some of the most appalling bullying I have ever witnessed in my professional life. And that bullying was sanctioned from the top of the party, and I mean the very top. And I feel it's interesting, it's just a reflection on what Joanne said about John Swinney earlier. John Swinney's made a political calculation. I suspect the reason why John Swinney finds himself unable to do what Anas Sarwar has done is because the people who are left in the SNP, particularly the members of Parliament and the staffers, are largely captured or cowed by the ideology that we all oppose. And the membership, what's left of it, are largely captured or too afraid to speak up. But the people around John, his advisors, staffers, MSPs, make it impossible for him to make that change. Now, I'm not sticking up for him. A strong leader ought to be able to do that. And John and I go way back. We were friends when we were teenagers, and I told him when he became leader of the party that he would not have my unqualified support until he met with gender-critical women, including For Women Scot, Women's Rights Network, LBGB Alliance, Scottish Lesbians. You know, it's very hard for me to tell you to go and organise in your own party when I've given up on the SNP for the time being, but there's only so long you can bang your head against a brick wall, and then you have to go and have a life. But other parties seem to be more amenable to that sort of organisation, and there may come a time when the SNP has to face up to the reality of the failings of the last few years, and then it may become amenable again to that sort of internal organisation. But do not forget that it's very difficult to set up a new party, particularly under the first past the post system in the United Kingdom. But the list system in the top-up list in the Scottish Parliament does make it possible for strong independent candidates to be elected. And we've had people in the past like Margot MacDonald and Dennis Canavan who succeeded in being elected as independents. So it is something that people should think about, but I understand why people might be loath to do that, but I think it's something that should be thought about.
Thanks. Joanna, I've got a question. Seeing as we approach the 2026 holiday elections, Reform UK is projected to gain significant representation in Scotland, and Curtis has actually said that there's a potential there for Reform UK to have 12 to 15 MSPs. Now, the party, Reform UK, has been absolutely unequivocally clear that they recognise biological sex, its commitment to the policies that protect women's rights, such as safeguarding single-sex spaces, ensuring fairness in sports, and promoting evidence-based discussions on sex and gender in schools. And given that these are of growing concern to many women across Scotland, I'd like to ask the panel for all their opinions on how they see the role of Reform UK in shaping future debates and policies on women's rights. And do you think it's helpful to dismiss or criticise a party that's engaging with these concerns, or should there actually be space for constructive discussion on these important issues? I know it's a difficult question.
Shall I answer it first? Because I can say exactly what I think now, because I'm not in elected politics. Not that I normally let that hold me back. I'm obviously not a fan of Reform UK. I don't like their policies on immigrants. I don't like their policy towards Europe. I think many people in that party are responsible for taking us out of the European Union. I don't think the European Union is some benign institution, but I do think it would be in the interests of the United Kingdom and Scotland to be part of the European Union. And they don't support Scottish independence, and they're pretty right-wing, so they're not really my cup of tea, but I think they've got a right to contribute to the debate. And I think they have a right to be heard. We have free speech in our society for a reason, and I'm unimpressed by John Swinney's plan to organise against the far right, because I think it's at best it's a distraction activity. It'd be much better to organise and get on with running the country well. I'm not sure what we mean by the far right, and I'm not sure that Reform actually are the far right. I think the British National Party, they were the far right. So I don't think Reform should be demonised, and I don't think people should be prevented from sharing platforms with them if they want to, or debating with them, and if they get people elected to the Scottish Parliament, so be it. But I want to make it absolutely crystal clear that they're not a party with which I have any sympathy. If there are people in that party who support women's rights, that's a good thing. I'm glad about that, but I don't have any time for them. But I think they've got a right to be heard.
I'm going to echo what Joanna Cherry has said, that any party coming forward, absolutely we get free speech, they can come forward and state their case. What I don't want is parties coming forward and making false promises, which we know that all parties and people out there do see that, by the way, of every party, right? I went into politics, not a career politician. I went in to tell the truth and do the right things, and I hope I will continue on doing that. And I think anybody coming in into politics really need to be true with themselves. We've got enough toxicity, divisiveness. We don't need that. We need to bring the country together. Look what's happening around the world, right? That just shows you we need to be stronger here as a United Kingdom together. Sorry, I'm not saying it in that way, but it's just, you know, absolutely, we need to be together, because look at the wars, look at the things, food security, you know, when it comes energy security, so much stuff is happening that is sad. We were a very, very progressive state, and I'd like to think we still are, but yet, when it comes down to there's a war somewhere or something's happening, the country comes to a stop. We don't get our vegetables. We don't get our oil and gas. We don't get certain things, right, happening all round. This is really bad because what's happening out there. So any party that's going to think of starting a new party coming in better state their case properly, and even the parties that are there better state their case very clearly for the public, because the public right now do not trust politicians. And it's sad. It really is very, very sad. I have met Nigel. I think I met him about a month ago. And, you know, I did have a chat with him. I'm quite open to chatting with anybody. I certainly won't be changing my party, right? Okay, because where I stand. And it's your values, what you believe in. And if my party is doing something wrong, I'm also the deputy chair of the party. I put them to right as well, whether they're here or in the, you know, UK Parliament, the party there. I speak to them and I voice it, what's not right, because no party will come out with a magic wand and wave it and suddenly everything will be controlled, whether it's immigration or anything. I believe in economic migration. I believe in opening our doors to those people that need to be let in, but I don't believe people, and I'll openly say this, that people that come on the boats, because it's their safety. Think about it, they're drowning, a lot of them are coming over, and the people that are only making money is those agents. I know, I come from an Indian background. I've seen this in India. People sell their land, you know what? They leave their parents there, and they go to look for a better place. And what happens? Sometimes they don't even get to that place. So who's made the money here? You know, it's nothing to do with any party here. It's those agents that are cashing in on this. So yes, we do need to control that. But what I do think is, at this moment, yes, if Reform want to come in, they want to be part of the discussion, but make sure that the discussion you're part of, that you're actually progressive in helping and not giving us more false promises. So that's my answer. Whether it's a right or wrong one, I think you can only judge that yourself. We've all got our own choice when you put that X on that box. I will be standing again, because I would definitely be in that Parliament to fight for women and girls' rights. I know what I'm for, and I know I put the party to a side, even though my party is very much for women and girls, but I will continue on fighting for women and girls. And yes, if the Reform come in, I'll hopefully work cross-party, because the best work that's done in that Parliament, I've got a domestic abuse bill that was signed cross-party, and it's going forward. We're sitting here cross-party, so the best work done, I will work with all parties to make sure that we can deliver for women and girls.
I don't have any time for the Reform Party or the policies that I've heard from them. I think a cynicism that they ride on is people's feeling that party politics or politics generally is not for them, and they encourage people to vote against their own interests. You might argue, in terms of the European debate, there was an element of that, and it's unforgivable for a political party to pretend that everybody else wants to do you down, and this is a kind of a general point, when there are things that are not in your interest to support. So I don't have any time for the Reform Party. They are entitled to organise, people are entitled to form political parties, and there are legal limits to what we can all say, and we should recognise that. But when John Swinney said that he was going to organise against reform and this kind of civic Scotland and all the rest of it coming together, I did reflect that at the Labour Party conference, where we were, from Cathcart Labour Party, had brought forward a motion saying that the consequence of the Caste review was that the guidance to schools round the experience of young people and affirming care and all the rest of it should be withdrawn, we, as a bunch of very nice elderly TERFs, were described as being from the politics of the Reform Party. And I can be very clear that if Patrick Harvey had his way, if he's going to have an all-embracing group of people to exclude Reform, he'd want me to be excluded and women like me as well. And that's where the dilemma is, that actually in that debate you're missing the point about where that political debate has been. And I think that the second point is, it's unforgivable to me that the debate around women's rights, the sensible, logical, rational argument that you don't put rapists in women's jails, and that you should have separate toilet facilities, that the left have quit that ground and left that space for others to come in, and then they complain when they come in. So it's our responsibility to assert that this is pretty mainstream politics. And actually, some of the really radical things that women are saying about the reforming of the family, changing the responsibilities, caring responsibilities, are hugely radical. I mean, goodness me, in my lifetime, we went from saying that domestic abuse was just a domestic, and you couldn't have rape in marriage, to transforming the potential of women to achieve and to be liberated, and even to name male violence. So that was always, to me, something that was progressive and radical. I accept it's unforgivable that we have quit that field. But it's also important, as we said before, the one thing I never realised as a young person, that I actually could have a political strategy which says, well, I'm not arguing with you. It never occurred to us as women back in the day when we were making demands. They were just saying, well, we're not arguing with you about it. Well, if you don't make an argument, you can't win an argument. And the element of the instinct to close down political debate is to the detriment of those who need political change, not those like Nigel Farage already have political power. So I think there are limits to what that engagement with reform should be. We should expose the cynicism of a party that probably has pretty regressive views on what women can do. But it is the fault of those progressive elements who believed in changing women's lives that they've quit the field in the name of progression and left women looking for somewhere else, to people that will speak up for them. That is the fault of the political process. It's not, in my view, the fault of those who may be attracted to supporting the Reform Party now. I'll fight them tooth and nail, but then we should be celebrating argument and debate and not closing it down.
That's so spot on. I mean, the irony for me is that the Labour Party in England are losing votes to Reform. Every little by-election, every council election, Reform are going up, up, up. Labour are either losing or their vote is just decimated, basically. So why, when we're losing votes to Reform, are we just chasing the Reform vote by trying to ape them? People are not that stupid. They don't look at Labour and go, oh yeah, okay, well maybe. They just think it's bullshit. We've never stood for those things. So why, my former party, have never stood for those things. So why pretend that they do? In 2017, we got the Tory majority down in England, in the rest of the UK, to 12, I think it was. And that's because we had a very red Labour manifesto. The Tories had a very blue manifesto. We could choose, voters could choose between the two. They knew what they were getting. They knew what those parties would stand for. And on the doorstep, it's the first time I heard manifesto. It was mentioned, it was brought up. But instead of opposing their themes on immigration, for example, and making a reasoned political argument why the care sector needs those people, why we need those people in actually every aspect of the NHS, in teaching and all that, which is what Labour stands for, right? Instead of making that argument, we're trying to ape Reform, and people smell bullshit. Because some of the people that are saying that stuff have been saying the opposite of it in places like this for 10, 20 years. Why are we trying to ape reform, and why are we allowing them in that space where people like me are called a reform activist because I want working women to be represented by the Labour Party? It's just crap politics, really, really crap, and it's not rocket science. All you actually have to do to be a good politician is get the zeitgeist by talking to people about where they are, about what these issues mean to them. You talk on the doorstep, you go to meetings like this, you have people to your surgery in your constituency, and the majority of people just want girls to be in a safe space doing sport. They want things to be fair. That's not right-wing or, the Labour Party are just getting it so wrong. And I'm not right-wing, I never will be, and I'm most angry with Labour over this than any other thing. They're allowing reform to win this argument.
I think that's us coming to an end of women's representation. You lot are brilliant. There was a wee question in there. It's about, we've got an election coming up in 2026. Anybody got any surprises they would like to throw into it? I'm right up for them. I'm quite happy to join in. But really, thank you very much to Johann Lamont, to Pam Gosal, to Joanna Cherry, and to Rosie Duffield. Thank you very much for coming to the stage in Alloa.